Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The waters of the Rhoyne glimmered like beaten bronze beneath the morning sun, and the ship's sable hawk slid along its sluggish current, sails snapping lazily in the wind. Tyrion Lannister stood by the prow, a cup of sour red in hand, squinting into the hazy distance where the black towers of Volantis rose against the sky. He had been many things in his life: Lord's son, whoremonger, prisoner, kinslayer. Now he was little more than a fugitive with a head full of ghosts. Each bend of the river brought him closer to the city that reeked of smoke and spice and chains. He had heard tales of Volantis, the oldest daughter of Valyria, a city where the rich lived behind high black walls, and the poor swarmed below like flies on dung. Volantis, muttered Tyrion, tasting the word like a curse. A fine place to drown, if nothing else. The captain beside him, a dour Tyroshi named Morido, spat into the water. You'll find no shortage of ways to die there, dwarf. Knives, whips, or a red priest sermon. Take your pick. Tyrion smirked. I've survived worse sermons. I even gave one once, though my congregation consisted of a sellsword and a crate of Dornish wine. The captain barked a laugh, then went back to his duties. Tyrion lingered a while longer, watching as the walls grew larger and the smoky air thickened. Somewhere beyond those walls, men plotted, schemed, and killed for gold. He felt almost comforted by the thought. It was a world he understood. By the time Sable Hawk docked among 1,000 other ships, Volantis had already begun its song. The clamor of chains, the call of merchants, the chants of the Red Temple echoing across the city. A line of slaves marched past the docks, their collars gleaming in the sunlight, each marked with the sigil of their master. Tyrion could almost hear Tywin's voice behind him, cold and commanding. A Lannister must never be chained. He laughed bitterly. A pity you're not here to see how wrong you were, father. At a tavern near the fish market, Tyrion found a table in shadow and ordered wine strong enough to make him forget the smell of the docks. The tavern was loud, sailors brawling, whores laughing, dice clattering on the tables. Just the kind of place he liked. He had been in Volantis less than an hour when trouble found him. A tall man with scars across his bald scalp dropped into the seat opposite him. You are far from home, Lannister, the man said in the guttural common tongue of Essos. Tyrion set down his cup slowly. If you've come to kill me, at least let me finish my wine. I've had worse company than death, but better than you. The man grinned, showing gold teeth. No killing today. My master sends greetings. He says he has something that may interest you. Something about your blood. Tyrion's amusement faltered. My blood? Aye, the golden blood of Casterly Rock. The stranger left a coin on the table, stamped with a roaring lion, a Westerosi coin, old and weathered. Tyrion turned it over in his fingers, his heart quickening. Only a fool ignored such a bait. Hours later, beneath the orange glow of Volantis's many lanterns, Tyrion followed a hooded guide through winding alleys that stank of river mud and incense. They came to a warehouse overlooking the Black Bay. Inside, men trained with swords and axes beneath banners of a roaring bronze bull, the sigil of the brazen beasts of the Black Bay, one of the deadliest sellsword companies in the East. Their leader, a grizzled man called Captain Rogar, rose to greet him. So the lion's cub has come at last. I half expected you'd send a whore in your place. "I've found whores tend to handle diplomacy better than most captains," Tyrion said. "But alas, my purse is light, and my curiosity is heavy." Rogar's laugh rumbled like thunder. "You'll want to hear this then. We've come across something in our travels. A boy, not more than 10, golden-haired, sharp of tongue, claims his mother was a serving girl in Lannisport. Says his father bore a lion's ring." Tyrion froze. "That's a bold claim in these parts." "Bolder still," Rogar continued. "He has the ring, and the boy's tongue knows too much for a bastard peasant's brat. We thought you might pay well to learn more." Tyrion's mind raced. A bastard with Lannister blood? It could be a trick, a ploy to wring gold from a fool. Yet some part of him itched to know. Cersei's secrets, Jaime's follies, Tywin's sins. The Lannisters bred enough shadow to hide a dozen bastards. "I might pay well indeed," Tyrion said softly. "But tell me, Captain, how does a company of killers find time to chase old family scandals?" Rogar's smile thinned. "Because others are paying for the same information. Men who wear the red robes of R'hllor." That chilled him more than any blade. The Red Temple had grown bold of late, spreading their fire-fueled faith across the free cities. If they sought a Lannister heir, it meant prophecy, and prophecy meant danger. Tyrion took another sip of his wine, buying time to think. "Very well. I'll see this boy." Rogar nodded. "Tomorrow, then, at dusk, and bring no guards, unless you fancy dying in Volantis' gutters." When Tyrion left the warehouse, the night had grown thick and misty, the air humming with the distant roar of the temple bells. He walked alone through the maze of streets, his mind alive with possibilities and dread. A bastard Lannister in Essos, a sellsword company guarding him, red priests hunting secrets of blood and flame. The lion's cub had thought himself done with family, but the past, it seemed, had claws sharper than any blade. And somewhere, in the black heart of Volantis, those claws were waiting. The next day dawned gray and thick with fog, the air heavy with the stink of the river. Bells tolled from the temple of the Lord of Light, their mournful clangs rolling across the rooftops of Volantis like distant thunder. Tyrion Lannister awoke in a rented room above the tavern called the Weeping Cat, where rats scuttled beneath the floorboards and the wine was strong enough to strip the paint from a hull. He had dreamt of Casterly Rock, of golden halls echoing with laughter that turned to screams, and woke with his throat dry and his head full of ghosts. He dressed slowly, tugging his worn doublet over his misshapen shoulders, then studied his reflection in the small, cracked mirror. "A fine sight," he muttered. "A lion reduced to a rat." He forced a smile, though it never reached his eyes. Downstairs, the tavern keeper's daughter brought him bread, cheese, and a pitcher of watered ale. Tyrion ate absently, his mind already on the night to come. Rogar's words echoed in his thoughts. A boy with a lion's ring, and the red priests seek him too. He needed information before he met the sellsword captain again, and that meant finding someone who knew Volantis' darker corners. So, with coin enough for trouble in his purse and a dagger at his belt, Tyrion set out into the city. Volantis by day was a feverish tangle of noise and color. Slaves chanting prayers as they scrubbed the marble steps of their masters' manors. Merchant ships crowding the harbor, the air rich with spice and smoke. Red priests stood at every corner, preaching of dragons and the coming of the night's great war. Tyrion passed one, a tall woman with eyes like burning coals, shouting that the Lord of Light would soon awaken his chosen queen beyond the sea. Her words sent a chill down his spine. He ducked into a narrow lane of shadowed stalls and found what he sought, a smuggler's den that stank of brine and secrets. Inside, he found Miria Sand. She was a woman of Dorne, though her face was half hidden beneath a hood of faded crimson. Her eyes were sharp, dark as polished obsidian, and her smile was one that made men both trust and fear her. Tyrion had heard of her before, a thief, a traitor, a whisperer of information. "You've got the look of a man who's misplaced something," she said, leaning back against a crate of dried fish. "Or someone." Tyrion smiled. "Perhaps both. Tell me, my lady, have you ever heard of the brazen beasts of the Black Bay?" Her expression shifted at once. "A dangerous question to ask in Volantis, dwarf. They sell swords to the highest bidder and slit throats for free if you speak their name too loudly. Then I'm in luck. I intend to hire them, not insult them." She tilted her head. "And what would a Westerosi fugitive want with killers from the Black Bay?" "Curiosity," he said simply, "and perhaps a bastard boy." Miria laughed, low and musical. "A bastard? There are 10,000 bastards in this city. Why chase one?" "Because this one claims to be a Lannister." That caught her attention. Her gaze sharpened. "Lannister. I've heard the name whispered among the beasts. They guard something they do not understand, and priests in red robes have offered gold for it." Tyrion leaned closer. "Then perhaps we might be of service to each other." So it was that Miria Sand became his companion, though whether ally or betrayer, Tyrion could not yet tell. Together they walked the streets as dusk fell, cloaked and hooded, until they reached the warehouse by the bay once more. This time, the air around the place was tense. Sellswords watched from the shadows, hands on their blades. Rogar awaited them inside, seated at a long table beneath a hanging lamp. "You brought company," he said with a frown. "A guide," Tyrion replied. "The city is large, and I am small. She evens the scale." Rogar's eyes lingered on Miria for a moment before he waved for them to follow. "Come then, see what you've come for." They passed through a side door into a dimly lit chamber where a single boy sat on a stool, guarded by 2 men. He was perhaps 10 or 11, thin, dirty, his hair pale gold beneath the torchlight. When he looked up, Tyrion felt a faint shock. The boy's eyes were green, sharp, wary, too old for his face. "You're him?" Tyrion asked softly. The boy nodded. "They said you'd come. They said you're the one who killed your father." For a moment, Tyrion could not breathe. "They say many things," he murmured. "And what do you say?" The boy's jaw tightened. "My mother was a serving girl in Lannisport. A man came to her one night, a knight with a golden ring. He gave her coin and left. When she died, she told me to keep the ring safe." He held it out, a heavy signet bearing the roaring lion of House Lannister. Tyrion recognized it at once. His father had a dozen such rings, but this one bore a scratch across its mane, the mark Tywin's steward had once made while polishing it. Tyrion knew that ring. It had belonged to his father. "Where did you get this?" Tyrion demanded. The boy hesitated, eyes darting to Rogar. "From my mother. She said the lion would come for me one day." Tyrion's mouth went dry. It could not be true. Tywin Lannister, so proud, so cruel, would never father a bastard and let him live. And yet the ring was real. "Who else knows of this?" Tyrion asked Rogar. "Only those who've paid to know," said the captain grimly. "And the Red Priests, they've offered gold beyond gold. They believe the boy is marked by destiny." Tyrion's temper flared. "Destiny is the refuge of fools. Tell me who sells him and who profits." Before Rogar could answer, the door burst open. A blaze of firelight flooded the room as red-robed figures entered, their torches burning with unnatural brightness. The smell of smoke and incense filled the air. "The Lord of Light claims his chosen," cried one. "Stand aside, unbelievers!" Steel rang as the brazen beasts drew swords. Miria seized Tyrion's arm. "We must go, now!" Chaos erupted. The red priests hurled pots of flaming oil, setting crates ablaze. Sellswords shouted, the boys screamed, and the fire leapt from wall to wall. Tyrion ducked as a torch flew past, smashing into a barrel of wine that exploded in purple flame. Through the smoke, he saw Rogar fighting 3 priests at once, his blade cutting down one, then another, before he vanished in the inferno. The boy was gone, dragged away by unseen hands in the confusion. Miria pulled Tyrion toward a side door, coughing from the smoke. They stumbled into the night, flames roaring behind them, and fled through the labyrinth of alleys until the fire was only a dull glow on the horizon. At last they stopped beside the river, breathless and blackened with soot. Tyrion leaned against the wall, trembling from exhaustion. "The boy," he gasped. "Did you see where they took him?" Miria shook her head. "No, but the priests won't kill him. Not yet. They'll take him to their temple. They believe he's part of their prophecy." Tyrion looked toward the glowing skyline of Volantis, where the temple of the Lord of Light rose like a mountain of fire. "If they have him," he said quietly, "then we'll have to steal him back." And though he said it with weary humor, something in his voice had hardened. The boy's story might be false, his blood a lie, but Tyrion Lannister had no intention of letting his father's ghost win another victory. The game, as ever, had only begun. The fires burned through the night. From every bridge and tower in Volantis, men could see the glow rising from the docks, orange and terrible, reflected in the oily black of the river. Tyrion and Miria had found shelter in a crumbling warehouse on the city's east side, where the smell of fish and smoke clung to the walls. Neither slept. When dawn broke, pale and cold, Tyrion sat with his back to a cracked pillar, sipping wine from a stolen flask, and studying the woman who had risked her life to drag him from the blaze. Miria Sand was cleaning her blade, slow and careful, her dark hair falling loose around her face. The firelight had left soot on her cheek, but her eyes were steady as ever, sharp and knowing. "You've a strange habit," Tyrion said finally. "Saving men who bring you nothing but trouble." She didn't look up. "You've a stranger one, dwarf, chasing a bastard boy into the arms of red priests." He smiled faintly. "Aye, that was foolish of me. My father would be proud. He always said I had a gift for disgracing the family." Miria slid the dagger into her boot. "You think the boy's truly of your blood?" Tyrion stared into the dim morning light. "The ring was real. My father's, or a perfect copy. The boy's eyes. Gods, they were Lannister eyes if ever I've seen them. And yet," he trailed off, shaking his head, "if Tywin had a bastard, he'd have drowned it in its cradle before letting it live as proof of his weakness. No, there's deceit in this. There always is." "Then why risk yourself?" she asked. Tyrion gave a crooked grin. "Because deceit is an old friend, and I like to see how it dresses itself these days." They spent the morning gathering what scraps of news they could. Word spread quickly through Volantis. A fire at the Brazen Beast's barracks, dozens dead, their captain missing. The Red Temple had sealed its gates, and red-robed acolytes marched through the streets chanting in tongues few understood. "The priests will keep the boy hidden," said Miria, as they crossed a narrow bridge over a canal thick with refuse. "Their great temple's like a fortress. Walls of black stone, guards with blades of obsidian. No one gets in or out without a priest's blessing." "Then we'll find someone who can give us one," Tyrion replied. They turned toward the temple district, where the streets widened into great avenues lined with statues of dragons and winged men. Smoke rose from countless braziers, filling the air with a heady perfume of myrrh and burning oil. At the heart of the square stood the great temple of R'hllor, its doors of brass carved with scenes of flame and prophecy. Tyrion studied it a long while. A man could lose his soul in there, he said softly. Miria looked at him. A man who's already lost his home might not mind the trade. They were about to move closer when a voice hissed from an alley behind them. Lannister, over here. Tyrion turned to see a ragged figure beckoning, a sellsword from the night before, his face half burned, one arm bound in a bloody cloth. You're alive, Tyrion said, stepping nearer. Barely, the man rasped. Rogar's dead. The beasts are scattered. But I saw who took the boy. A priest, tall, red mask, voice like thunder. They called him Moresi. He's high among them, a speaker of visions. He means to take the boy east, to the Shadowlands. Said he'd found the Lion of Prophecy. The Shadowlands? Miria frowned. That's half a world away? The man nodded weakly. They leave tonight, through the eastern gate. A convoy under the temple's protection. He looked at Tyrion with bloodshot eyes. If you mean to stop them, do it soon. Once they're on the road, you'll never see the boy again. Tyrion pressed a coin into the man's good hand. For the road you won't take, he said quietly. As the man slumped against the wall, Miria turned to him. You truly mean to chase them? You'd risk your life for a child who might be nothing to you? Tyrion's smile was bitter. Aye, because once I might have been that child, unwanted, unclaimed, and if the gods have any cruel humor left, they'll see fit to let me suffer for it. By dusk, they were ready. Miria's contacts among the smugglers provided disguises, robes of dull red cloth, masks of bronze. They joined the line of pilgrims entering the temple for the evening prayers. Inside, the air shimmered with heat from 1,000 fires. Shadows danced across the walls as red priests chanted before a great brazier that blazed like a captured sun. Tyrion kept his head bowed, heart hammering. The vast chamber smelled of ash and incense. In its center stood the high altar, and beside it, half hidden in the smoke, he glimpsed the boy. Dressed in clean linen now, his hair combed, his eyes wide with terror. A tall figure in a crimson mask raised his hands. Behold the child of light, the priest thundered, born of the lion's seed, marked by the fire. Through him shall the Lord of Light reveal his dominion. The crowd roared in response. Miria gripped Tyrion's arm. We can't reach him here, she whispered. Too many eyes. Then we'll reach him on the road, Tyrion replied, voice low and steady. When faith sleeps and fire dies. That night, beneath a moon veiled by clouds, they followed the temple convoy eastward along the Rhoyne. A dozen wagons moved in silence, guarded by red-robed warriors bearing torches. The boy rode in the central cart, watched by the priest Moresi himself. Miria and Tyrion shadowed them from the riverbank, keeping to the reeds. The night hummed with insects, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. When we strike, whispered Miria, you'll need to be fast. The priests carry blades dipped in flame oil. One touch, and you'll burn. I've burned before, Tyrion said grimly. It's the living afterward that hurts. They waited until the convoy stopped to rest near a ruined watchtower. As the priests settled their fires, Miria crept forward like a shadow, dagger in hand. Tyrion followed, heart pounding, clutching a short sword he'd scarcely had time to learn the weight of. Then it began. A whisper, a movement. Miria struck down the nearest guard before he could cry out. Tyrion clambered into the wagon, yanking back the canvas. The boy stared at him, startled. "You came," he breathed. "Lannisters always pay their debts," Tyrion said with a crooked grin. "Now move before I add yours to the tally." They fled toward the river, shouts erupting behind them. Fire arced through the air. One torch struck a tree, setting it ablaze. Miria cut down a priest who blocked their path, her blade flashing red in the firelight. But as they reached the water's edge, Moresi himself appeared, tall and terrible in his burning mask. "You think to defy the Lord of Light, imp?" he roared. "This child is chosen." Tyrion stood his ground. "Chosen? He's a pawn in your game, as I was in mine, but I've grown tired of games." Moresi raised his hands, and flame leapt from his palms, searing the night. Miria hurled a dagger. It struck his mask with a ringing sound, sending him reeling. Tyrion seized the boy's arm and plunged into the river. The cold water swallowed them. For a moment, there was only darkness and the rush of current. Then they surfaced downstream, coughing and gasping, while the burning light of the priests faded into the distance. On the far bank, soaked and shivering, Tyrion looked at the boy, small, frightened, alive. "Your name," he said between breaths. "Tell me your name." "Lion," the boy whispered. "My name is Lion." Tyrion stared at him for a long moment, then laughed, a harsh, weary laugh that echoed across the water. "Lion Lannister, eh? Gods help us both." And with that, the lion and his shadow disappeared into the dark heart of Essos, with the fires of Volantis burning far behind them. The Rhoyne ran wide and quiet beneath the starlit sky. Tyrion and Miria guided their stolen skiff along its black waters. The boy, Lion, huddled between them, shivering beneath a cloak far too large for him. The air smelled of silt and damp reeds. Behind them, Volantis burned faintly on the horizon, a red wound against the night. Tyrion leaned on his oar, sweat beading his brow despite the chill. His arms ached, his head pounded, but the old stubbornness that had kept him alive through every humiliation now kept him rowing. "If the gods are kind," he said, his voice hoarse, "they'll grant us a night's peace before the next disaster." "The gods are rarely kind," Miria answered. She was watching the riverbank, her eyes sharp in the gloom. "And the Red Temple has long arms. They'll send hunters after the boy before dawn." The child said nothing. He stared into the dark water as though seeing faces beneath it. Tyrion caught the look and felt a prick of unease. "You swim better than you burn, I hope," he muttered. "We'll need both before this is done." They rowed until the first gray light crept across the river. At last, they reached a narrow inlet where reeds grew tall as men and herons took flight at their approach. They hid the skiff among the rushes and made camp beneath the skeletal remains of an old stone bridge. Tyrion kindled a small fire, shielding the smoke with his cloak. Lion sat close to the warmth, his thin hands trembling. "They said I was special," he whispered suddenly. "The priests. They said the Lord of Light spoke to them, that my blood burns brighter than fire." Tyrion poured him a cup of watered wine. "They tell every fool the same, lad. The trick is not to believe them." "But the dreams," the boy said. "I saw things before they happened. Fire and lions and..." He hesitated. "You. I saw you come for me." Miria shot Tyrion a wary glance. He only sighed. "Prophecies again. I've been called many things in my life, boy, but never a vision from the gods." Lion looked at him with unsettling calm. "You came anyway." Tyrion found no answer for that. They rested through the day, and as night fell once more, Miria spread a map across the ground. "We can't stay near Volantis," she said. "Too many eyes. If we travel east along the Rhoyne, we can reach Celeris. From there, maybe Qohor or Norvos." Norvos, Tyrion mused. A city ruled by bearded priests. How fitting. Perhaps they'll mistake me for one and spare my head. But Miria's tone grew grim. "The Red Temple will hunt us in every city that bows to their flame. We'll need to vanish before they learn where we're bound." Tyrion nodded. "Then east it is, into the wilderness, where the only thing likely to eat us is honest hunger." That night, as Miria kept watch, Tyrion lay awake beside the dying fire, staring at the stars. He thought of his father, proud, merciless, certain of his legacy, and wondered what ghost now laughed to see his dwarf son dragging a supposed Lannister bastard across Essos. He thought too of Jaime and Cersei, of the rock that would never again call him son. The river murmured softly, as if mocking his thoughts. "The lion's blood runs thin," it seemed to say. By dawn they were on the move again, traveling inland along a dirt road choked with weeds. Lion grew quieter with every mile, his wide eyes darting at every rustle in the brush. Tyrion tried to distract him with jests, but the boy's unease was contagious. There was a stillness in the air that spoke of pursuit. By midday, they reached the ruins of an old Rhoynar fort, half swallowed by vines. They took shelter in what remained of its courtyard, where stone lions lay crumbling among the grass. Miria searched for tracks, while Tyrion rummaged through a chest left to rot centuries ago. Among the debris, he found a bronze coin bearing the sigil of the old Rhoynar kings. A sunburst crossed by waves. He turned it in his fingers, thoughtful. "Strange," he murmured. "The Rhoynar once thought themselves eternal too. Now all that's left of them fits in my palm." "Perhaps that's why they built their walls so high," Miria said from across the courtyard, "so they wouldn't hear the tide coming." Tyrion smiled faintly. "Then we're no better. Every wall I ever built came tumbling down." They rested until dusk, then pressed onward. The road grew rougher, the land wilder. Trees closed in around them, thick and gnarled. Somewhere beyond the dark forest, wolves howled. The boy clung close to Miria, and even Tyrion found himself glancing over his shoulder. It was near midnight when the attack came. Shadows burst from the trees, men in red robes, their blades gleaming in the starlight. Miria shouted, driving Lion behind her, while Tyrion drew his dagger. Steel clashed in the darkness. One priest lunged, torch raised, and Tyrion ducked beneath the flame, ramming his dagger upward into the man's belly. Hot blood spilled across his hand. The priest fell without a sound. Miria fought like a storm, her curved blade flashing, cutting down 2 men before they reached her. But there were too many. One seized her cloak, another dragged the boy away screaming. Tyrion snatched a fallen torch and hurled it at the nearest attacker. The man caught fire and shrieked, stumbling into his companions. For a heartbeat, chaos ruled. Miria grabbed the boy and fled into the trees. Tyrion stumbled after them, lungs burning, the night alive with shouts and firelight. They ran until the sound of pursuit faded behind them. At last, they collapsed beside a stream, gasping for breath. Miria's arm was bleeding, the boy's face streaked with dirt and tears. Tyrion sank to his knees, staring at his blood-stained hands. 7 hells, he muttered. The Lord of Light must have quite the appetite for Lannisters. Miria tore a strip from her sleeve and bound her wound. "He's not finished yet," she said grimly. "They'll track us again by dawn. We need a place they won't follow." Lion looked up. "There's a shrine," he whispered. "I saw it in a dream. A hill with black stones, and water falling from the rock. We can hide there." Tyrion exchanged a glance with Miria. "And where is this miraculous refuge, little prophet?" North, the boy said simply. Near the hills of Andalos. Tyrion sighed. Of course it is. A cursed land, full of ghosts. Why not? Yet there was something in the boy's voice that made refusal impossible. By dawn, they were moving again, 3 fugitives bound by fate and folly. The forest gave way to rolling hills veiled in mist. Here the earth itself seemed ancient, the stones carved with forgotten runes. Birds circled high above, silent, as if even they feared to sing. When at last they reached the hill Lion had spoken of, Tyrion felt the hair rise on his neck. A waterfall spilled from the rocks, its spray catching the morning sun, and behind it yawned a cavern dark as a tomb. Strange carvings marked the entrance, lions, serpents, and flames entwined. This place, Miria murmured. It feels wrong. Then it suits us well, Tyrion said. They stepped inside, cool air wrapped around them, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something older, something that whispered from the stone itself. At the cavern's heart stood a cracked altar, and upon it, half buried in dust, lay a small metal disc shaped like a lion's head. Lion approached it slowly, his eyes wide. It was here, he whispered. I've seen this in my dreams. Tyrion watched in silence as the boy lifted the relic. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, and somewhere deep within the cave, a sound like distant thunder stirred. Miria drew her blade, uneasy. What have you done? The boy turned, the lion-shaped disc gleaming in his hands. He's coming, Lion said softly. The lion of fire, the one who was promised. Tyrion's mouth went dry. God save us, he muttered. Not prophecy again. But in the shadow dark behind the altar, something began to glow. Faint at first, then brighter, until the walls themselves seemed to burn with golden light. The lion's blood, it seemed, had awoken more than ghosts. The glow filled the cavern, soft at first, then searing. It shimmered across the slick walls and caught in the rivulets of falling water, turning them to threads of molten gold. Tyrion shielded his eyes, squinting through the blaze. The lion-shaped disc in Lion's hands had begun to pulse with light, its eyes burning like twin coals. "Put it down, boy!" Miria shouted, stepping forward, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Whatever that thing is, it's not meant for—" Her words broke off as a gust of wind swept through the cavern. The firelight flickered and the air itself seemed to twist. For a heartbeat, Tyrion thought the roof was collapsing, but the sound that followed was not of stone breaking. It was a roar, deep and distant, rising from the depths of the earth. The boy stood unmoving, his eyes reflecting the golden light. "He remembers," Lion whispered. "He knows his blood." "Bloody wonderful," Tyrion muttered, stumbling backward as the ground trembled. "We've woken something that thinks it's family." Miria grabbed the boy's arm, yanking him away from the altar. The light flared, then dimmed as the disc slipped from his fingers and clattered to the stone floor. The roaring ceased, leaving only the hush of the waterfall and their ragged breathing. For a long while, none of them spoke. The glow faded, and the cave returned to shadow. Miria was first to break the silence. "We should leave," she said, her voice low and hard. "Now, before the next miracle kills us." Tyrion bent, picked up the disc, and turned it over in his hand. The metal was warm, pulsing faintly against his skin. The lion's eyes no longer glowed, yet he felt a strange hum in his chest, as though something unseen had marked him. "I think," he said slowly, "we've just inherited another fine mess." They left the cavern before the sun rose, climbing the rocky slope until the plains stretched out before them. The air smelled clean and cold, the horizon washed in pale gold, For the first time in days, the land seemed empty of pursuit. Still, Tyrion could not shake the memory of that roar, or the look on the boy's face. "You saw something down there," he said quietly as they walked. "Tell me." Lion hesitated. "A lion," he murmured, "but not of flesh, fire and shadow together. It spoke to me in a tongue I didn't know, but I understood it. It said, 'The blood remembers.'" Tyrion snorted. "The blood remembers what it pleases. Mine remembers mostly wine." Miria shot him a look. "Mock if you like. But the priests believed the boy was chosen. Maybe this is why. Chosen for what? To give me another headache?" Tyrion glanced at the disc again, weighing its worth. "If prophecy has any sense, it will keep its distance. I've seen enough to know it tends to end in fire and fools." They traveled north for 2 days, keeping to forgotten paths. Food grew scarce, and the boy's strength waned, but Lion never complained. When he slept, he whispered in his dreams, words that made no sense to either of them. On the 3rd night, they found an abandoned Rhoynar watchtower overlooking the plains. Its stones were cracked and moss-covered, yet it offered shelter from the biting wind. They made camp within its crumbling walls. Miria hunted what she could, a hare and a handful of berries, while Tyrion built a small fire. When darkness fell, he poured wine into 3 tin cups. "To survival," he said, raising his in a mock toast. "A cause even my father might have approved of, had he lived to see how poorly I'm accomplishing it." Miria smirked faintly, though her eyes remained distant. "You speak of your father often." "Only because the bastard refuses to stay buried," Tyrion replied. "He haunts every choice I make, and now his shadow walks beside us, wearing the face of a child." Lion glanced up from the fire. "You hate him." "Hate?" Tyrion sipped his wine. "A strong word, and not nearly strong enough. My father was a builder of empires and a destroyer of suns. He made me, then despised the shape I took. If there's a hell, he rules it still." The boy said nothing more. The wind howled outside, and the flames danced higher, casting long shadows on the stone. That night, Tyrion dreamed again. He stood in the great hall of Casterly Rock, though the walls were burning. His father sat upon a throne of molten gold, his eyes alight with fire. "The lion's blood is never lost," Tywin said, his voice echoing through the flames. "It only changes hands." When Tyrion awoke, dawn was creeping over the hills. Miria slept with her dagger in hand, and Lion sat staring out through a crack in the wall. "Dreams again?" the boy asked softly. "Just ghosts reminding me they're still owed their due," Tyrion said. He rubbed his temples. "Tell me, Lion, does your lion of fire speak of what comes next?" The boy turned his gaze eastward. "He says we're not alone. Others are coming." Moments later, the sound of hooves drifted from beyond the ridge. Miria stirred at once, hand to her blade. "Scouts!" she hissed. Tyrion crawled to the gap in the wall. Riders were approaching, 5, perhaps 6, bearing black banners marked with red flame, the Red Temple's hunters. "So much for peace," he muttered. They fled before the riders crested the hill, darting into a ravine choked with thornbush and rock. Miria led the way, swift and silent, while Tyrion and Lion scrambled behind. The boy stumbled once, but Tyrion caught his arm and pulled him up, gritting his teeth against the ache in his legs. Arrows hissed past, clattering against stone. One struck Tyrion's cloak, pinning it to a rock. He tore free, cursing, and followed Miria down a narrow path toward a dried riverbed. By midday, they reached a grove of twisted trees, hidden deep between cliffs. There, at last, they paused to rest. Tyrion collapsed against a boulder, chest heaving. "You know," he panted. "For a woman who claims to be a smuggler, you run like a sellsword." Miria smiled grimly. "Smugglers live longer." Lion knelt beside them, his face pale. "They'll keep following. They won't stop." Tyrion wiped sweat from his brow. "Then we'll give them something to chase. My father once said the best trap is built from pride and gold. We have neither, so we'll improvise." Miria frowned. "What do you mean?" He held up the lion-shaped disc. "This trinket is what they want, isn't it? Let's make them think they have it." By nightfall, their plan was set. They left a false trail leading toward the foothills, scattering bits of cloth and footprints in the dust. At its end, beneath a dead tree, Tyrion buried a bundle wrapped in his spare cloak. Inside it, a round piece of scrap bronze polished to mimic the relic's glint. "They'll find it and think we're fools," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. "Which, in fairness, is not far from the truth." Miria smirked. "And when they realize the trick?" "By then," Tyrion said, glancing east toward the horizon, "we'll be halfway to Celeris, or the grave." As the moon rose, the three travelers vanished once more into the wild, leaving behind only the whisper of the wind through the trees and the faint glimmer of false gold buried beneath the earth. The hunt was not over. It had only grown more dangerous, and though Tyrion told himself he sought only survival, some part of him, small and treacherous, knew the truth. He wanted answers. About the boy, about the fire, about the blood that would not let him rest. The Lion of Lannister was far from his rock, but his shadow had begun to grow long once more. The morning mist clung to the lowlands like ghostly silk, and the air carried the faint scent of rain. Tyrion trudged through the wet grass beside Miria and the boy, their cloaks drawn tight against the chill. For 3 days they had moved north and east, sleeping little, speaking less. The riders of the Red Temple had not caught them, though the echo of pursuit still haunted every gust of wind. They followed a narrow trail carved by traders long gone, winding through the broken hills of Andalos. Once, this land had known kings and temples of its own. Now, only the bones of stone pillars jutted from the soil, like the ribs of some long-dead god. The silence pressed heavy on them all. It was near midday when Miria called a halt. "We need rest," she said, scanning the horizon. "There's a shepherd's cottage ahead, abandoned most like. We'll take shelter till nightfall." Tyrion wiped the sweat from his brow and glanced at the boy. Lion's steps were slow, his small frame trembling with weariness. "A fine idea," Tyrion said. "If the roof doesn't fall on us, I'll call it the best lodging I've had since fleeing Westeros." The cottage was a ruin, half swallowed by weeds and wildflowers. The door hung from one hinge, and the hearth within was cold and choked with ash. Yet to Tyrion, it looked almost homely. They cleared a space by the fire and made camp. Miria busied herself gathering wood while Tyrion poured wine into his cup. He sipped, savoring its sour bite, and let his eyes wander to the boy. Lion sat by the hearth, turning the lion-shaped disc over in his hands, tracing its carved mane with a trembling finger. "That trinket again," Tyrion said softly. "You guard it like a crown." Lion looked up. "It speaks to me sometimes. Not in words, in feelings. Heat, anger. It's like it remembers something." Tyrion raised a brow. "Then let's hope it forgets soon. I've had enough of things that burn." Miria returned, dropping an armful of sticks. "He's not wrong to keep it close," she said. "If it truly belonged to your father, or if it's older than that, it may be worth more than gold." "Gold I can drink," Tyrion replied. "Ancient magic only ever demands blood." Still, he watched as Lion placed the relic carefully beside the fire, the flames catching in its golden surface. For a heartbeat, Tyrion thought he saw the lion's eyes glimmer again. But when he blinked, the light was gone. They ate what little food they had, salted fish and stale bread, and as night fell, rain began to patter softly on the roof. The sound lulled Lion to sleep. Mirya sat by the door, sharpening her dagger. Tyrion, half drunk and half exhausted, leaned back against the wall. "You could leave," he said after a long silence. "Take your share of what coin I've got and vanish. You owe me nothing." Mirya's eyes flicked to him. "And you? Would you leave the boy?" "I've left worse behind. But not this." Her tone was unreadable. "You think saving him will save you?" Tyrion laughed quietly. "My dear Mirya, if redemption were wine, I'd have drowned in it years ago. No, I save him because it irritates the gods, and I find that reason enough." She smiled faintly, then turned her gaze back to the storm. When dawn broke, the rain had stopped. Mist drifted between the hills, soft and silver. Tyrion woke to find Lion standing outside the cottage, staring northward. His face was pale, eyes distant. "What now, lad?" Tyrion muttered, stepping beside him. "There's something ahead," Lion whispered. "I can feel it calling." Tyrion frowned. "If it's another prophecy, best we ignore it. Prophecies have a nasty habit of coming true in the most inconvenient ways." But Mirya joined them and nodded toward the distant rise. "There's smoke. A village, perhaps." By midday, they reached it, a small settlement built of stone and timber, nestled beside a stream. The villagers were wary of strangers, but Mirya's charm and a handful of silver eased their suspicion. They found food, shelter, and, most precious of all, news. A merchant in the tavern told them that word of the Lion Child had spread along the Rhoyne. The Red Temple offered a bounty for any who might reveal his whereabouts. Some whispered that the priests sought not to kill the boy, but to crown him, a savior born of fire and shadow. Tyrion listened, jaw tight, as he drained his cup. "It seems we've become a story already, saints and sinners both. The priests will not stop until they have him." Mirya's expression darkened. "Then we leave at first light." But Lion shook his head. "They'll find us wherever we run." The Lion said the same. Tyrion groaned. "The Lion again. If it starts telling you my sins as well, do us all a kindness and keep them to yourself." The boy's gaze was steady. "He said the fire is following, that it will not rest until the circle is closed." "What circle?" Mirya asked. Lion hesitated, then spoke so softly they almost missed it. "The circle of blood." A chill passed through the room. That night, the wind howled over the roofs, rattling shutters and doors. Tyrion slept poorly, plagued by dreams of lions prowling through smoke. When he woke, the fire had gone out and the boy was gone. Panic flared. He shouted, rousing Mirya, and together they rushed into the street. Dawn was gray, the village silent. Then they saw the footprints, small, leading north toward the hills. "7 hells!" Tyrion hissed. "He's walking straight into their hands." They followed the trail, moving fast. The path wound upward through fog and stone, until they reached a ridge overlooking a deep valley. There, among the ruins of another forgotten shrine, they saw him. Lion stood before a cracked stone idol, the lion disc glowing faintly in his hands. He looked calm, almost peaceful. Around him, the air shimmered with heat, though the morning was cold. "Lion!" Mirya shouted. "Come away from there!" The boy turned, and for a moment his eyes seemed to burn with gold. "I can't," he said softly. "He's waking again." The ground trembled. From beneath the shrine came a low rumble, like a beast stirring in its sleep. Miria drew her sword, and Tyrion stumbled forward, shouting, "Lad, for the love of every god, stop!" The boy pressed the disc against the stone lion's chest. A sound split the air, half roar, half thunder, and blinding light poured from the cracks in the idol. The world went white. When the glare faded, Tyrion found himself on his knees, ears ringing. The shrine lay in ruins. The boy was gone. Only the disc remained, lying in the dirt where Lion had stood. Its golden surface was dull now, lifeless. Miria knelt beside it, her face pale. "Where is he?" she whispered. Tyrion stared at the empty space where the boy had been. His voice was low and hoarse when he finally spoke. "Wherever the lion sleeps," he said, "it seems he's taken my last chance of peace with him." He picked up the disc, its cold weight heavy in his palm. Far below, thunder rolled across the hills, though the sky was clear. Somewhere, the fire was moving again. The storm broke over the hills 2 days later. It came without warning, a black wall of cloud sweeping down from the mountains, the air heavy with the smell of rain and lightning. Tyrion and Miria fought against the wind as they climbed the stony path toward higher ground. The lion-shaped disc hung from a leather thong about Tyrion's neck, thudding cold against his chest with each step. They had not spoken much since the shrine. The boy's vanishing hung between them like a ghost neither dared to name. Miria's anger had burned itself down to silence, and Tyrion's jests had dried to ash. Yet both carried the same thought. Whatever had taken Lion was not finished with them. By dusk, the sky was a bruise of thunderheads. They found shelter in a cleft of rock overlooking the valley. Miria struck flint to spark a fire, shielding it from the wind with her cloak. Tyrion sat beside her, soaked and shivering, staring into the small flicker of light, as if it might offer answers. "He's gone," Miria said at last, her voice flat. "The boy's dead, or worse." "Worse is a large field," Tyrion murmured. "I've lived in it most of my life." She looked at him sharply. "Do you never tire of jokes?" "Constantly. But the silence they leave behind is far less comforting." The wind howled around them, carrying the distant roar of thunder. Tyrion turned the disc in his hands, its edges glinting in the firelight. "When I was a boy," he said slowly, "I used to wander the tunnels beneath Casterly Rock. I'd imagine the old kings of the rock still whispered through the stones. Promises, warnings, curses. I suppose I always knew my family's ghosts would find me again. I just didn't expect them to be so literal." Miria watched him a long moment. "You think the boy was a spirit then? Some phantom born of your guilt?" "I've seen ghosts enough to know they don't need flesh to make trouble," Tyrion replied. He slipped the disc back beneath his cloak. "But whether Lion was Tywin's blood or something older, I mean to find out. I'm not leaving this world ignorant." The storm raged through the night. When dawn came, pale and cold, they descended into the valley, following the stream that wound between the hills. The air felt heavy, strange, as if the world itself held its breath. They passed through a grove of blackened trees, their trunks split by lightning long ago. Beyond it lay the ruins of an old fortress, half-collapsed towers, walls swallowed by ivy. Once, perhaps, it had guarded the road between kingdoms. Now it was only a grave of stone. Miria crouched beside the shattered gate. "Tracks," she said quietly. "Boots. Fresh." Tyrion peered closer. The prints were deep, leading inward. The priests? Or worse? They followed the trail through the crumbling courtyard. The air smelled of damp ash. At the center of the ruin stood a pit where a fire had burned not long ago, its embers still faintly glowing. Scattered around it lay symbols drawn in blood, the sign of the Red Temple, the seven-pointed flame. Tyrion felt the hairs on his neck rise. Well, that answers one question. They were here. Miria's gaze shifted toward the far wall. And they're not far. A sound broke the silence, low chanting, echoing from beneath the stones. Miria drew her dagger. Tyrion hesitated, then followed her toward a stairwell half hidden by rubble. The air grew warmer as they descended, the scent of incense thickening with each step. They emerged into a cavern lit by torches. Red-robed figures knelt in a circle around a brazier, their voices rising and falling in a harsh, rhythmic tongue. At the center stood a tall man in crimson armor, his mask shaped like a lion's head. The sight of it made Tyrion's blood run cold. "By the Seven," he whispered. The priest raised his arms. "Behold the blood reborn," he intoned. "The child was but the vessel. The fire endures." And there, upon the brazier, something glowed. A molten sphere of gold, pulsing with light. It was not metal, not truly. It looked alive, like a heart forged of flame. Tyrion took a step forward before Miria's hand caught his sleeve. "Don't," she hissed. "You can't win this fight." "I don't plan to win," he whispered back, "only to ruin their victory." He reached into his cloak, drew the lion disc, and flung it hard into the circle. It struck the brazier with a hiss, and the light exploded outward. The priests screamed as fire leapt from torch to torch, devouring the air itself. Miria seized Tyrion's arm, dragging him toward the stairs. They fled as the cavern erupted behind them, the roar of collapsing stone chasing them upward. The fortress above groaned as if alive, its walls cracking under the fury below. They burst into the open just as the ground gave way. The ruin collapsed into itself with a thunderous roar, a pillar of smoke rising to the gray sky. Miria fell to her knees, coughing, while Tyrion stared at the destruction below. "So ends another temple," he said, voice shaking. "One day, someone will build a shrine to our bad luck." Miria spat dust from her mouth. "You threw it away. The disc." He nodded. "A fair trade, I think. One cursed relic for a brief extension of life." But even as he said it, he felt the warmth against his chest again. He reached beneath his cloak and froze. The disc was still there, untouched, cold. He met Miria's gaze, his mouth dry. "I threw it into the fire. Then how?" A faint light flickered from the valley below. The smoke shifted, revealing a shape amid the ruin, something vast and gleaming, crouched among the wreckage like a beast rising from sleep. The air trembled. A sound rolled across the hills, deep and terrible. It was not thunder. It was a roar. Miria stared, eyes wide with horror. "What did you unleash?" Tyrion could barely speak. "Whatever it is, it carries my family's taste for dramatics." The roar came again, louder now, and a rush of heat swept through the air. Far below, two immense eyes opened, molten gold burning in the smoke. The creature shifted, wings of flame unfurling against the storm-dark sky. For a moment, Tyrion saw it clearly, a lion wrought of living fire, vast as a fortress, every breath a furnace. It turned its head toward them, and the earth quaked beneath their feet. "Run," Miria said. Tyrion did not argue. They fled across the hillside, the light of the burning ruin behind them growing brighter with every step. Rain fell, hissing as it met the heat. The creature roared again, a sound that shook the bones of the world. When they finally collapsed beneath the shelter of an overhanging cliff, both were gasping, drenched in sweat and rain. The valley below was a sea of flame. Miria stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Is it following us?" Tyrion looked toward the horizon, where the fiery lion prowled through the ruins. "Not yet. Perhaps it's savoring its freedom." He drew the disc from his cloak once more. It lay dull and silent in his palm. Seems it wasn't just an heirloom after all. The Lannisters always did leave behind unpleasant legacies. Miria's eyes narrowed. Then, we destroy it. Tyrion closed his fist around the disc, feeling its faint pulse. A tempting thought, he said quietly. But tell me, how does one kill what was born of fire and pride? No answer came, only the wind and the distant burning roar that seemed to echo the laughter of every ghost that had ever borne the lion's name. The fire beast prowled the valley for 3 days and nights, and the land itself seemed to flinch beneath its steps. Tyrion and Miria hid among the cliffs, surviving on rainwater and stale bread, watching the horizon glow red each dusk and dawn. Smoke choked the sky. Even the stars fled before the flame. When at last the creature's roars faded into the east, silence returned, uneasy, brittle, as though the world held its breath, afraid it might come back. Tyrion sat upon a boulder overlooking the smoldering ruins of the fortress, the lion-shaped disc turning slowly between his fingers. The metal was warm again, pulsing faintly like a heart. He muttered to himself, "Tywin Lannister, you magnificent bastard. Even in death, you find new ways to haunt me." Miria approached, her cloak torn, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. "It's moving east," she said, "toward the Riverlands. If it reaches the towns, it'll burn them to cinders. You saw what it did to the valley?" Tyrion glanced at her. "I saw. And you expect me to stop it, I presume? Me, a dwarf armed with wit, wine, and one cursed trinket. Someone must try." He laughed, bitter and dry. "You sound like Jaime, always the hero, sword gleaming, honor shining. Look where that got him." She crouched beside him. "You're not your brother." "No," he said softly. "I'm worse." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke. Tyrion's gaze followed it eastward, toward the distant shimmer of the Rhoyne. If that thing was born from this disk, perhaps it can be bound by it, or destroyed. Either way, the sooner I'm rid of it, the sooner I can drink in peace again. Miria studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then we follow the fire." They set out at dawn. The hills rolled away behind them, and the path led down into the wide, fertile plains that bordered the river. Farmers had already fled their villages. Blackened fields smoldered where the beast had passed. The sun itself seemed dimmer, veiled by the smoke that hung over the land. As they traveled, Tyrion's thoughts drifted to Westeros, of Casterly Rock gleaming above the sea, of his father's cold voice echoing through marble halls. "You are a Lannister of Casterly Rock. Act like one." He spat into the dust. "I am acting like one, father. I've unleashed ruin and gold in equal measure." By evening, they reached a small fishing hamlet, half burned to ash. The few survivors huddled near the riverbank, their faces blackened by soot. A woman with a baby in her arms stared blankly at Tyrion and Miria as they passed. "It came from the hills," she whispered. "A lion made a fire. The priests followed it, singing." "The priests?" Tyrion repeated. "Aye," the woman said. "They walked through the flames like smoke. Said the Lord of Light had taken his true form." Miria's hand tightened on her sword. "They're using it. They mean to make it a god." Tyrion felt his stomach twist. "Then we must find their temple before they crown it." They took a boat from the villagers, gliding east along the Rhoyne under a blood-red sunset. The current carried them past blackened woods and fields turned to ash. At night, the horizon flickered with firelight. The lion was near. Miria kept watch while Tyrion examined the disk under the moon. Its golden surface reflected not the stars, but the faint outline of a roaring beast. He turned it, and for an instant, he thought he heard it breathe. Don't look too long, Miria warned from the prow. You'll start to believe it's speaking to you. It already is, he murmured. They found the Red Temple's encampment at dawn, a gathering of tents and wagons around a ruined bridge. Dozens of priests knelt before a great brazier, their chants rising in waves. At their center stood the high priest, Moresi, his red mask gleaming like blood. Tyrion's heart stopped. Him. I saw him die. Miria's eyes narrowed. You're certain? As certain as a man can be when he's half blind from fire. The priest raised his arms toward the east. Behold the Lion of Light. He comes to cleanse the world of shadow. The crowd roared its devotion. Across the river, the flames flared, and through the smoke, the fiery lion appeared, massive and terrible, striding across the fields. Its mane blazed like the sun. The priests fell to their knees, weeping. Tyrion clenched the disc until its edges cut his palm. We end this now. They moved under cover of the chaos, slipping between tents until they reached the brazier. The heat was unbearable. Tyrion felt his breath catch, his pulse racing in time with the relic's faint heartbeat. What are you planning? Miria asked, eyes fixed on him. Improvisation, he said, my favorite sin. He stepped into the open, raising the disc high. The priests turned, their chants faltering. Moresi's masked gaze locked on him. The lion's blood returns, the high priest cried. He carries the vessel. Tyrion forced a smile. Indeed, but I've found the lion prefers to dine on his worshippers. He hurled the disc into the brazier. Flames erupted skyward, turning white hot. The priests screamed as the blaze leapt outward, consuming tents and wagons alike. The fiery lion roared, its golden eyes blazing brighter than the sun, and then, impossibly, it turned toward them. Miria seized Tyrion's arm. It's coming. The ground shook as the creature strode across the river, steam rising where its paws met the water. Moresi shouted a prayer, arms outstretched. Lord of Light, claim your servant. The beast opened its jaws and engulfed him. The air cracked like thunder. Tyrion stumbled backward, shielding his face from the heat. Miria dragged him behind a collapsed wagon as fire rained from the sky. Whatever you did, she shouted, it's not finished. I've noticed, he yelled back. Through the haze, the lion's form began to change. The flames twisted, folding inward until, where the creature had stood, a figure took shape. A man of fire and shadow, tall as a tower, his face a mask of molten gold. His eyes were human and terrible. When he spoke, the sound was both roar and voice. Tyrion of House Lannister. Tyrion froze. You've mistaken me for someone who matters. The fiery man stepped forward. You are the blood that defied its maker, the son who slew the father. The debt must be repaid. Miria drew her sword, though it looked pitiful against the light. Stay back. The figure's gaze shifted to her. Another child of sand and shadow. You will bear witness. Tyrion, trembling, forced a smirk. If you're here to collect debts, you'll have to queue behind my family. The creature extended a hand. The disc, thought lost to the fire, leapt from the brazier and flew into its grasp. The circle is closed, it said. The lion is won. Then it vanished, collapsing into a column of smoke that rose into the dawn sky. Silence followed. The fire was gone. The priests were ash. The fields still burned, but weakly, fading in the wind. Miria turned to him. What did it mean? Tyrion stared at the empty air where the figure had stood. That the debt's not settled, he whispered. Not yet. He looked down at his hands, burned, blackened, but empty. The disc was gone for good. In the distance, the first villagers crept from hiding, staring in awe at the ruined plain. Tyrion Lannister, the imp of Westeros, had survived again, but this time he felt no triumph, only the weight of something vast and unfinished pressing upon his chest. He turned to Miria. "We leave. East to Meereen. There's someone there who likes dragons. Perhaps she'll have advice about lions." And so they went, limping toward the rising sun, leaving behind the ashes of prophecy and the ghosts of fire. Yet even as they walked, Tyrion felt a warmth still burning deep within his heart, faint but unyielding, the echo of a roar that would not die. They journeyed east through the scorched plains where nothing lived but crows and the ghosts of smoke. For many miles, the Rhoyne lay far behind, and the hills gave way to flatlands veiled in heat and dust. Tyrion rode a thin, bony mule he had bought from a terrified villager, while Miria strode beside him, her cloak drawn tight, her dagger glinting at her hip. The air shimmered, heavy with the scent of ashes. Each step away from the valley should have brought peace, but Tyrion found none. Sleep came rarely and never kindly. When it did, his dreams burned. He saw the lion of fire prowling through the dark halls of Casterly Rock, its golden mane filling the corridors with light. He would hear his father's voice echoing through the roar. "You are my blood, yet not my son." And then he would wake to the endless plains, the taste of smoke still in his throat. Miria noticed his restlessness but said little. She was no stranger to haunted men. Still, she watched him with wary eyes, as if half expecting the same flame that had devoured the priests to awaken within him. They stopped at a lonely inn near the road to Celeris. The innkeeper, a bald man with a twisted smile, sold them a room and stew thick enough to dull the hunger in their bellies. The common hall was nearly empty, only a few travelers muttering over ale and a blind minstrel plucking a broken harp. When night fell, Tyrion sat by the fire, wine in hand, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. "Tell me something," he said at last. "What drove you from Dorne, Miria Sand? Surely there are easier ways to die than chasing cursed lions with a half-sized exile." She leaned back, eyes half in shadow. "My mother was one of Oberyn Martell's paramours. I was never meant to sit in Sunspear's courts or dine among lords. I learned early that the world has little use for those born on the wrong side of a noble's bed, so I sailed east, traded, smuggled, survived. And now I'm here, following a fool who taunts gods with wine and wit." Tyrion raised his cup. "To fools, then, we keep the gods entertained." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "And to what end, dwarf? What do you hope to find?" He stared into the fire. "An end, perhaps. I've been running from my family's ghosts since I put a crossbow bolt through my father's chest. But now those ghosts run faster than I do." Miria's gaze softened. "Then maybe it's time to stop running." Before Tyrion could answer, the door creaked open. A gust of cold air swept in, and with it came a stranger cloaked in red. The innkeeper stiffened. Every voice in the hall fell silent. The stranger pulled back his hood, revealing a pale face marked with the faint scars of burning. "The Lord of Light watches," he said softly, "even in the dark places." Tyrion's hand drifted toward his cup, though he wished it were a blade instead. "I was wondering when your fiery friends would find me again. Do they send one priest at a time now, or are you just particularly foolish?" The man's eyes gleamed. "You mock what you do not understand, Lannister, but fire remembers its servants." He placed a small object upon the table, a fragment of gold, warped and blackened. Tyrion's blood ran cold. It was part of the lion-shaped disc. "Impossible," he whispered. "It burned. I saw it fall into the brazier." The priest inclined his head. Fire does not consume its own. Miria was on her feet in an instant, dagger flashing. You followed us from Volantis. What do you want? To finish what was begun, the priest said. The lion's spirit has awakened, but it remains bound. The blood that freed it must seal it anew, or perish in its flame. Tyrion laughed, though the sound came harsh. You speak as if you mean to kill me. You'll find I'm rather good at disappointing would-be murderers. The priest smiled faintly. Not I, Lannister. The fire will claim what it is owed. Before either of them could move, he cast the fragment into the hearth. The flames surged upward with a roar, leaping higher than the chimney's mouth. Shadows danced madly on the walls. For a heartbeat, Tyrion saw within the blaze the shape of a lion's face, vast and terrible. Miria seized his arm and pulled him back as the fire burst outward, engulfing the hearth. The priest did not move. The flames wrapped around him like a cloak, and his lips curved in a blissful smile before he vanished within them. The fire died as swiftly as it had risen. The hall was silent, but for the crackle of embers, the other travelers had fled. Only Tyrion and Miria remained, staring at the blackened stones. Tyrion was the first to speak. Well, he said hoarsely, that was either divine judgment or a spectacular suicide. Miria looked at him. He said the fire would claim its debt. What if he meant you? Tyrion met her gaze, his mouth twisting into a weary smile. Then let's hope it's patient. I've a long list of debts yet to pay. They left the inn before dawn, the smell of smoke clinging to their clothes. By midday, they reached the banks of the Rhoyne once more. The river was wide here, slow and brown, its waters glimmering under the pale sun. They found an old fisherman willing to ferry them downstream toward Celeris. As they drifted with the current, Tyrion sat silent at the stern, the water's murmur filling the space between them. He felt the warmth again beneath his tunic, faint but steady. He drew out the lion's fragment. It had reformed in his pocket, whole once more, its eyes dull and lifeless. Miria stared at it in disbelief. You threw it away. It burned. How? He cut her off with a weary sigh. Magic, faith, or the gods' poor sense of humor. Take your pick. The river carried them for hours. As the sun dipped low, the waters ahead began to glow faintly red. A heat rose from the surface, unnatural and oppressive. The fisherman paled. Something's in the river, he whispered. We'll go no further. Before Tyrion could protest, the man leapt into the shallows and fled toward the bank. The boat drifted onward. The glow deepened. Bubbles rose from the depths, and then, suddenly, the river burst apart in a column of steam and fire. A shape emerged, wreathed in flame yet bound by water. The lion, reborn. Tyrion stumbled backward, clutching the fragment. The creature's golden eyes fixed upon him. You, it said, not with words, but with a voice that filled the air and the river alike. You who carry the blood and the blame. Miria raised her blade, though it shook in her hand. Stay behind me. Tyrion laughed, mad and breathless. Behind you? I rather think we're both in front of it. The lion stepped onto the riverbank, its paws turning the water to steam. Its mane burned white hot, and within the blaze, Tyrion saw faces. His father, his brother, his sister, all sneering down at him. A Lannister pays his debts. The words rang through his skull. The disc burned in his hand. He felt the heat climb his arm, searing his flesh, yet he could not let go. Miria's shout pierced the haze. Tyrion, the river, throw it in. He turned toward her, teeth gritted, and hurled the relic into the heart of the Rhoyne. The water exploded into light. The lion roared once, a sound that shook the sky, and then it was gone, swallowed by the river's depths. Silence fell. Only the current remained, whispering over the rocks. Tyrion collapsed to his knees, his hand blistered and black. Miria knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder. "It's done?" He looked at the water, where faint ripples glimmered gold before fading away. Done, perhaps? Or perhaps the gods merely paused for breath. The boat drifted onward, carrying them east into the dark. The sky above was cloudless, yet Tyrion swore he could still smell smoke on the wind. The river carried them for 3 days, winding through lands where the trees grew thick and twisted, their roots clutching the banks like the fingers of old corpses. Tyrion's hand had blistered and blackened where the fire had kissed him. He bounded in rags soaked in wine, though the pain lingered beneath, pulsing like a second heart. Miria took the oars, steering the small boat eastward. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, yet her eyes burned steady. Tyrion often caught her studying him when she thought he wasn't looking. Half suspicion, half concern. The river was quiet, but for the splash of water against wood and the whisper of wind through reeds. By the 4th evening, they reached the ruins of an old bridge. Half of it had fallen into the water. The rest stood like the ribs of a drowned beast. Tyrion insisted they make camp there. Miria built a small fire among the stones, while Tyrion sat with his back against the crumbled arch, sipping from a flask. His thoughts wandered like ghosts, always circling back to the same names: Tywin, Jaime, Cersei, and now Lion. All lions, all devoured by pride. He muttered, "A family of fools who mistook crowns for halos." Miria glanced up. "You speak to ghosts again?" "Always," he said. "They're far better listeners than the living." She poked at the fire with a stick. "Tell me of them." Tyrion smiled wearily. "Ah, the Lannisters. You'd find more mercy in a nest of vipers. My father ruled like a god, my sister like a storm, and my brother..." He stopped. "My brother was the best of us, and that, I think, was his tragedy." Miria was silent for a while, then said softly, "And you? What are you, Tyrion Lannister?" He stared into the flames, the jest that gods tell when they've grown bored of heroes. A soft sound interrupted him, a splash in the water below. Both of them turned. The fire crackled, and the night seemed to hold its breath. Another splash followed, closer this time. "Fish?" Miria whispered. "Fish don't walk," Tyrion replied. Shapes emerged from the shadows beneath the bridge. Men, 6 of them, cloaked in wet leather, swords glinting, river bandits. The leader grinned, showing teeth like broken stones. "2 travelers alone on the Rhoyne. A fine catch, this." Tyrion sighed. "If you're looking for gold, I'm afraid you're a few kingdoms too late." The man laughed. "Gold, wine, women, anything you've got will do." He drew his blade. Miria rose in one smooth motion, her dagger flashing. "You'll find I'm not easily taken." The bandits lunged. The first fell with Miria's dagger buried in his throat. Another rushed Tyrion. The dwarf swung his flask into the man's face, then jammed the broken glass into his eye. Blood splattered across the stones. The others hesitated, but only for a breath. Then came the roar. It was not human. It rolled through the valley deep and terrible, shaking the bridge itself. The bandits froze, eyes wide. One dropped his sword and fled. The others followed, stumbling over the rocks in blind panic. Miria turned toward the river, her face pale. "Not again," she whispered. The water was boiling. Steam rose, veiling the surface in mist. Tyrion's stomach twisted. "I threw it away. I swear by every god I threw it away." The river erupted. From its depths rose the lion of fire, smaller than before, but no less fierce. Its mane burned white, its eyes molten gold. The heat drove them backward. Tyrion's hand throbbed with pain. Beneath the bandages, the flesh glowed faintly, like embers. He understood then. The fire had not left him. It had marked him, claimed him. The lion advanced, each step turning the river to steam. Its voice filled the air. Blood calls to blood. You cannot unmake what you are. Myrya seized Tyrion's arm. "We run!" But he stood rooted, his eyes locked on the creature. "If I run now, it will only follow. It always follows." The lion reared back, flames lashing from its mane. For an instant, Tyrion saw a face within the fire, not the beast's, but his father's, the same cold, proud eyes. "A Lannister must never flee," the voice said. Tyrion drew his dagger with his uninjured hand. "You're no father of mine," he snarled, and flung himself forward. Myrya shouted his name, but it was lost in the roar. The fire closed around him, blinding and searing. The heat consumed everything, the bridge, the river, the air itself. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer standing. The world was gone. He floated in a sea of gold and red, endless and bright. Shadows moved within it, lions, hundreds of them, each formed of flame and smoke. And among them stood one figure, cloaked in darkness, Tywin Lannister. "Still you defy me," the shade said. "Even in death, you shame our blood." Tyrion's voice was raw. "Our blood shamed itself long before I was born." The figure stepped closer, and the light dimmed. "You cannot escape it, boy. The lion's pride is eternal. It burns in you, in all of us. You may think yourself free, but you are bound by the same fire that forged our name." Tyrion clenched his fists. "Then let it burn, but I'll not be consumed by it." He felt the pain flare in his hand again, the heat growing unbearable. The sea of flame began to collapse, folding inward. The lions roared, fading one by one. Tywin's shadow reached toward him, but Tyrion raised his burning hand and drove it into the darkness. There was a blinding flash. He awoke on the riverbank, soaked and trembling. The ruins of the bridge smoldered behind him, but the lion was gone. Myrya knelt beside him, her face streaked with soot. "You're alive," she breathed. I thought so too," he rasped. His hand was blistered and black, but no longer glowed. The pain was gone. "What happened?" she asked. Tyrion stared at the river. The water was calm again, the dawn just beginning to color the sky. "I told it I was done running," he said softly. Perhaps it believed me. They sat in silence, watching the sun climb over the hills. The world smelled of wet ash and new light. Myrya glanced at him. "Is it over?" Tyrion managed a tired smile. "Nothing's ever over, but perhaps, for once, it's quiet." He looked at his reflection in the river, the face of a man older than his years, scarred by fire and loss. "The lion's pride," he murmured, "a curse and a crown. Yet here I stand, still breathing. That will have to do." Myrya rose and offered him her hand. "Come, lion of ashes, Myrina waits, and perhaps if your luck holds, the mother of dragons will hear your tale." Tyrion took her hand and climbed to his feet. Together they turned east, toward the far horizon where smoke met sunlight. The river flowed behind them, carrying away the last embers of the beast and the echoes of its roar. For the first time in many years, Tyrion Lannister did not look back. They rode east for many days, and the world began to change around them. The lands along the Rhoyne grew hotter, flatter, and more cruel. Great patches of cracked earth stretched between thorn bushes and dry reeds, and the air shimmered like molten glass above the distant road. The further they went, the less they saw of men. Villages stood empty, their wells choked with sand, their doors swinging idly in the wind. Tyrion Lannister had seen the scars of war before, yet here the scars were older, carved by gods rather than swords. The land felt wounded, as if it had not forgotten the fire that had once walked through it. He rode a mule still, a beast he had named Doom in a moment of grim humor. Miriah Sand rode beside him, wrapped in a cloak the color of dust. She had grown quieter since the burning of the bridge. The marks of battle and prophecy alike weighed on her shoulders, though she never complained. "You're thinking again," she said one night as they camped beside a dry stream bed. "I try not to," Tyrion replied, pouring wine into a tin cup. "It leads to unfortunate discoveries. For instance, I've just realized that of all the ways to die, starving in the wilderness ranks terribly low on my list of preferences." "You've faced dragons and gods," she said. "You fear hunger?" "I fear boredom more," he admitted. "Hunger, at least, offers a certain clarity." She smiled faintly and turned her gaze to the stars. The night above was wide and sharp, the constellations clear as if drawn by a careful hand. "Once," she said softly, "I dreamed of this road. I dreamed I would ride east and meet a man whose shadow burned brighter than his body. I thought it meant a lover. I was wrong." Tyrion snorted. "You still might be right. I burn easily enough." She shook her head, though a ghost of a smile lingered. "You hide your fear well, Lannister, but it's there. I can hear it in your silences." Tyrion looked into the fire. Fear is a useful companion, keeps the wine from dulling the senses. He drank deeply, then added, "What of you, Miriah Sand? What do you fear?" Her answer came after a long pause. "Oblivion. To live and die and be forgotten? My father fought for vengeance and glory. I was born of neither. If I die nameless, then what was I for?" Tyrion's gaze softened. "Then perhaps we share that curse. My kin built castles to outlast their bones. I build words and jokes. Both will crumble given time." They spoke no more that night, and the silence between them was not unkind. When dawn came, they broke camp and continued east. The air grew thicker, laced with the smell of salt and the faint sound of waves. By midday, the blue shimmer of the sea appeared on the horizon. Beyond it lay the slaver cities, and farther still, the great roads that led to Meereen. It was on the third day by the coast that they came upon the corpses. Dozens of them, sprawled across the sand where the tide lapped at their feet. Red robes clung to their burned flesh, their faces frozen in agony. Tyrion dismounted and crouched beside one. The man's eyes had been seared black, yet a faint brand still marked his chest. The seven-pointed flame of the Red Temple. Miriah joined him. "The priests again," she murmured. "But who killed them?" Tyrion gestured toward the sand. There were no footprints but their own. No men. No horses. Whatever did this came from the sea or the sky. He turned one of the corpses over with his boot. The flesh beneath was charred smooth, as though touched by lightning. "Or fire," he added softly. That night, they made camp inland, far from the shore. The wind howled across the dunes, carrying the smell of brine and death. Tyrion slept little. His hand ached where it had been burned, though the skin had long since healed. In the small hours before dawn, he dreamed again. He stood upon a black plain, the sky above a curtain of flame. Before him loomed the Lion of Fire, vast and terrible, but this time it knelt. Its voice rumbled through the world. You are bound, blood of the rock. Your debt remains. The fire sleeps, but it will wake again. Tyrion lifted his gaze to the burning heavens. Then tell me how to pay it, before it consumes us all. The lion's eyes burned brighter. You cannot pay what you still deny. He woke gasping, his throat dry, the dream's heat still clinging to him like sweat. Miria was awake already, sharpening her blade. You dreamed, she said quietly. I dream too much, he answered. It's becoming a habit I'd like to break. What did you see? The lion, he said simply, and my father's shadow behind it. She frowned. Perhaps the gods truly mean for you to face him again. Tyrion laughed bitterly. I faced him once with a crossbow. What else could they possibly want? Not his death, she said. His forgiveness. He looked away. That's the one thing Tywin Lannister never offered, even to himself. They moved on before the sun rose high. The road turned inland again, winding between barren hills. At the crest of one ridge, they saw smoke rising in the distance. A camp, or perhaps a village. As they drew nearer, they heard the clang of hammers and the murmur of many voices. A caravan was encamped by the road, its banners marked with the sign of a golden hand. Tyrion's breath caught in his throat. He knew that sigil. It had been his father's once, the hand of the king. Miria saw the change in his face. You know them. Too well, he said grimly. Men of Westeros, or what's left of them. They rode closer. The camp was filled with mercenaries, weathered men with the hard look of exiles. Their leader stood near the largest tent, tall and broad-shouldered, his armor polished to a dull gleam. When he turned, Tyrion froze. The man's hair was golden, his face lined with years, but his eyes, the same green as the sea at dusk, were unmistakable. 7 hells, Tyrion whispered. Jaime? The man looked at him, surprise flickering across his features before fading into something colder. You've mistaken me, dwarf, he said. His voice was deep, weary. Sir Jeremy Hill, captain of the Golden Hand. Miria's eyes darted between them. A common name, that. Tyrion stepped closer. I buried my brother in the dark of my heart long ago. If the gods have played another trick, I'll not laugh at it. The man regarded him a long moment. If I were the man you speak of, I'd tell you to let ghosts rest. But ghosts have a way of following lions. Tyrion felt the blood drain from his face. Then the fire took you too, he said softly. Sir Jeremy, Jaime, or his echo, smiled faintly. The fire takes us all, little brother. The difference is how long we burn. Before Tyrion could speak, a horn sounded from the east. Riders were approaching, their banners red and gold, the flame sigil of R'hllor gleaming in the light. The Red Temple had found them once more. Miria drew her sword. There's no end to them. Tyrion's gaze never left the golden-haired man before him. No, he said quietly. Not until the fire consumes the last of the lions. The horn sounded again, closer now, echoing across the hills. The wind carried the scent of smoke, sharp and familiar. Tyrion Lannister reached for his blade and smiled a bitter, knowing smile. Then let it come, he murmured. I've been running long enough. The wind from the east carried the smell of smoke and iron. Tyrion Lannister watched the horizon where the banners of the Red Temple rose like a tide of blood. Beyond the ridge, the land shimmered with heat, and faint glints of bronze betrayed the advancing host. There were hundreds of them, priests, sellswords, zealots, marching beneath the burning sun with torches held high though the day was bright. The Golden Hand's camp stirred like a hive. Men armed themselves in silence, the grim silence of those who had long forgotten hope. Miria Sand moved through their ranks with the grace of a hawk, strapping leather around her arms, tying her dark hair back. The man who called himself Sir Jeremy Hill, his face carved in the likeness of Tyrion's dead brother, stood at the camp's edge, watching the enemy with eyes that glowed faintly when the sun caught them. Tyrion approached him. "If you're truly Jaime," he said quietly, "then death has improved your sense of drama." The man's mouth curved in a tired smile. "I am what's left of him. The fire remade me. The priests think me their champion, but I broke from them when I remembered who I was." Tyrion studied him closely. The resemblance was uncanny. The same jaw, the same bearing, but the warmth that once filled Jaime's smile was gone. This was a man tempered by flame and loss. "You're no ghost," Tyrion said at last, "but neither are you the brother I knew." "No," Sir Jeremy said softly. "Your brother was a knight. I am only his shadow." Miria approached, her sword at her side. "Shadows can still kill," she said, "and we'll need every blade before the night is done." The horn of the Red Temple sounded again, echoing through the hills. The enemy had halted at the far side of the valley, setting their fires. Tyrion climbed a boulder to look upon them. He saw the red priests in their flowing robes, their torches burning without smoke. At their center stood a high altar carried upon the shoulders of slaves. Upon it blazed a brazier shaped like a lion's head. And above that fire hung the relic, the golden disc, whole again, gleaming like a second sun. Tyrion's breath caught. "It survived." Miria followed his gaze. "You said you threw it into the river." "I did," he said bitterly. "The river gave it back." Sir Jeremy looked toward the priests. "They mean to summon it again. The Lion of Fire. They think it their god reborn." "Then we end this before the fire wakes," Tyrion said, gripping his dagger. That night the valley burned. The Red Temple came in waves, their chants rising with the wind, torches flaring brighter with every cry to their god. The men of the Golden Hand met them with shields and steel, the air filled with the clang of metal, the screams of dying men, and the stench of burning oil. Tyrion moved among them like smoke, too small to be seen until his dagger found its mark. Miria fought beside him, her blade flashing silver in the firelight. Sir Jeremy cut through the zealots like a storm, his sword a blur of gold. But for every priest who fell, two more rose, chanting louder, their voices feeding the blaze. From the ridge above, the brazier flared, and the lion's shape began to form within it once more. Vast, molten, alive. Tyrion felt its heat from where he stood. The fire's roar drowned the battle. He turned to Miria, shouting over the din. "We have to reach the altar. It's calling to me." "You're mad," she yelled. "More than you know." He ran through the chaos, cutting, ducking, stumbling. The fire seemed to part for him, as though it recognized his blood. At the foot of the altar, a priest blocked his path, face hidden behind a mask of gold. "Lannister," the priest said. "At last, the circle closes." Tyrion's lip curled. "You and your circles. If this is destiny, it's an ugly one." The priest raised his hands. "You carry the blood of the rock, the pride that defied kings and gods alike. Through you, the Lion of Fire will rule the world of men." "I've had enough of ruling lions," Tyrion said, and drove his dagger into the priest's gut. As the man fell, Tyrion clambered up the altar. The relic hung above the flames, suspended by chains that glowed red with heat. He reached for it, feeling the fire lick at his skin. It should have burned him, but it did not. The heat sank into his bones, searing through his veins, and for an instant he saw everything. Casterly rock wreathed in light, his father's stern gaze melting into the face of the fiery lion, and the endless circle of blood that bound them all. The lion's voice thundered in his mind. "You are the flame's heir, Tyrion of the Rock. Accept it and be made whole." He laughed through the pain. "I've been broken long enough. Thank you." Miria reached him, her hand closing around his arm. "Throw it down." Tyrion met her eyes, then looked to the relic. "No," he said softly. "Not down. Up." With all his strength, he tore the chains free and flung the golden disc skyward. It spun through the air, trailing fire, until it vanished into the clouds. The brazier exploded. A column of flame shot upward, swallowing the altar and the battlefield alike. Men screamed as the fire swept over them, but it did not burn flesh. It burned only the shadow. When the light faded, the valley lay silent. The priests were gone. The flames had died. Tyrion lay upon the ground, his vision swimming. Miria knelt beside him, shaking his shoulder. "You're alive," she breathed. "Again," he rasped. "It's becoming a habit." Sir Jeremy stood over them, his armor blackened, his eyes dim. "The fire is gone," he said. "I can feel it leaving me." He knelt beside Tyrion, placing a hand upon his shoulder. "Whatever you did, it's ended the circle. The lion sleeps now." Tyrion looked up at the sky. The clouds glowed faintly gold, as though the fire still lingered beyond sight. "Sleep is good," he murmured. "Let's hope it dreams of something better than us." When dawn came, the valley was quiet save for the crows. The survivors of the Golden Hand buried their dead beneath cairns of stone. Miria bound Tyrion's burns and said little. She had seen too much death to waste words. Sir Jeremy stood apart, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I'll not follow you further," he said when Tyrion approached. "The fire gave me another life, but it isn't mine to keep. I'll fade with the morning." Tyrion nodded, his throat tight. "Jaime would have said something noble, I'm sure. I'll just say thank you." The man smiled faintly. "That's enough." By the time the sun climbed high, he was gone, leaving only a scorched mark in the grass where he had stood. Tyrion and Miria rode east once more, the ruins of the battle shrinking behind them. The air smelled of salt and new rain. For the first time in months, Tyrion felt the warmth of the sun without the sting of fire. Miria looked at him as they rode. "So, Lannister, what now?" He smiled faintly. "Now, we find the next bottle of wine, the next city, the next mistake. Life's full of them. And the lion?" He looked back once, toward the quiet valley. "Sleeping, I hope. But lions dream, and dreams have claws." They rode on until the road met the sea. The waves broke against the rocks, white and wild. Tyrion raised his cup in salute to the wind. To ghosts, to fire, and to fools who think they can outdrink both. Miria laughed softly. The sound carried over the surf, light and alive. For the first time in a long while, Tyrion Lannister felt the world breathe without smoke. Yet far beyond the horizon, where dawn met dusk, a faint golden shimmer still burned in the clouds, a reminder that even sleeping lions, in time, awaken. The sea lay before them, vast and silver under the pale sun. The wind carried salt and memory, and the cries of distant gulls echoed like the ghosts of lost kings. Tyrion Lannister stood upon the rocky shore, the waves lapping at his boots, and watched the horizon where the sky met the endless water. Somewhere beyond that line lay Meereen, the city of dragons and the queen who was said to command them. Miria Sand joined him, her cloak whipping in the wind. "You truly mean to go to her," she said. "The Dragon Queen." "She's fond of titles," Tyrion replied. "Breaker of Chains, Mother of Dragons, queen of whatever's left standing. Perhaps she'll add another, savior of fools who should have died already. Miria smirked faintly. You think she'll listen to you? I'm counting on her curiosity, he said. I have a talent for being too strange to ignore. They had left the valley behind, though the memory of fire still haunted their dreams. Tyrion sometimes woke in the night to the sound of roaring wind, certain he'd see the lion of flame stalking the stars. Yet dawn always came, soft and gray, and the world endured. Now, as he looked upon the restless sea, he felt something he had not felt in many years, an ache for the unknown, untainted by fear. He turned to Miria. You could stay. There are ships in Volantis bound for Dorne. The sands would welcome one of their own. And leave you to drink yourself to death among dragons? She said. I think not. Someone must make sure your wit doesn't get you killed before you're useful. He chuckled. A noble calling. Perhaps you'll earn a place in the history books as the woman who kept Tyrion Lannister alive. A rare feat. Her eyes softened. And you? How will they remember you? He looked out over the sea again, as the man who ran from his family and found new monsters to call kin. That night they found a tavern near the harbor, a place of sailors and smoke, where the wine tasted of salt and the floorboards creaked like old bones. Tyrion drank little, though the smell of it was comfort enough. Miria watched the door, ever wary. From the corner of the room, an old sailor approached, his beard white as frost. You going east? He asked, voice like gravel. Tyrion studied him. That depends. How many of your ships have sunk recently? The man grinned, revealing broken teeth. Only the ones that carried cowards. Then I suppose I'll risk it, Tyrion said. They struck a bargain before dawn. The ship was called the Maiden's Wrath, a weathered galley with patched sails and a crew that smelled of sweat and salt. As it cut through the waves, Volantis faded into the mist behind them, its black walls gleaming faintly in the light. Days passed. The sea was calm, though clouds gathered on the horizon. Tyrion spent his hours on deck, watching the water shift from gray to green to deepest blue. Miria sparred with sailors for coin and stories, her laughter rising above the crash of the waves. For a time, it almost felt like peace. But peace, Tyrion knew, was a thing that never stayed. On the seventh night, a storm struck. It came with no warning, lightning tearing the sky, wind howling like 1,000 beasts. The ship bucked and groaned, waves crashing over the bow. Tyrion clung to the railing, soaked and cursing every god he could name. Miria fought her way toward him, shouting something he could not hear over the roar. Then he saw it. Amid the storm, a shape rose from the water, vast, shining gold, its mane of light unfurling like fire in the rain. The lion. Tyrion's heart froze. No, he whispered. You're gone. The creature's eyes burned through the storm. It did not roar this time. It only looked at him, and in that gaze, he felt the weight of everything he had done. The blood, the lies, the endless running. Miria seized his arm. Tyrion, move! Lightning struck the mast. The world exploded in fire and noise. The ship heaved, split, and was swallowed by the sea. Darkness. When Tyrion awoke, he was lying on sand. The storm had passed. Waves murmured gently along the shore, and the sky was bright with morning. Miria sat nearby, drenched but alive, her dagger beside her. The ship was gone, torn to splinters, and no other souls had survived. She noticed him stir and rose to her feet. You breathe. I thought the sea had taken you. It tried, Tyrion croaked. It has poor taste. He sat up slowly, every bone aching. The beach stretched for miles in both directions, barren but for driftwood and broken shells. Behind them rose cliffs streaked with black rock. "Where are we?" Miria asked. Tyrion squinted at the cliffs. "Somewhere between luck and doom, I'd wager. The sea tends to drop me in places worth regretting." They followed the shore until noon, the sun baking the salt into their skin. At last, they found a cave in the cliffs, its entrance hidden by thorned vines. Inside, the air was cool, the stone carved smooth by time and water. There, on the far wall, shone a faint golden mark, the outline of a lion. Miria stepped back, sword drawn. "It's here." Tyrion stared at the mark. "No," he whispered, "it's waiting." The lion's eyes began to glow. Light spilled across the walls, shaping itself into figures. Tywin upon his throne, Jaime with his sword raised, Cersei crowned in shadow, and in the center, a smaller figure, misshapen, holding fire in his hand. Tyrion felt tears sting his eyes. "You again," he said softly to the light. "Haven't you tired of haunting me?" The lion's voice filled the cave, deep as thunder yet almost gentle. "You are the last of the line, the blood that remains. All that burns must end or burn forever." Miria glanced between them, her face pale. "Tyrion, what is it saying?" He took a trembling breath. "It's giving me a choice. Break the circle," the voice said. "End the pride that binds your name to flame. Cast away the blood of lions, and the fire shall sleep." Tyrion closed his eyes. Images swam before him. Casterly Rock, his father's sneer, his brother's laughter, his sister's lies. The weight of it all pressed down upon him, heavy as stone. He drew the last dagger from his belt, its blade dull but steady, and looked at his burned hand. "No more circles," he said. Miria stepped forward. "What are you doing?" "What lions never could," he replied, and drove the dagger through the palm that bore the mark of fire. Golden light burst from the wound, flooding the cave. The lion's image trembled, roared, and began to fade. Tyrion fell to his knees, the blade clattering beside him. Miria caught him before he struck the ground. When the light died, only the faint outline of a lion remained upon the wall. Cold, lifeless stone. Tyrion's breath came shallow. "It's done," he whispered. "The pride, it's gone." Miria bound his hand, her fingers trembling. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "Still here. Stubbornness runs in the blood." Outside, the waves crashed softly against the shore, carrying away the echoes of fire and fate. The sun dipped toward the horizon, turning the sea to gold. Miria looked at him, her eyes bright. "So what now, lion of no pride?" Tyrion chuckled weakly. "Now we find wine. And if none exists on this cursed shore, I'll make some from my own blood. Seems I've enough to spare." As the tide rose, they sat together at the mouth of the cave, watching the day fade. The sea whispered its endless song, and the golden mark upon the wall dimmed to nothing. For the first time since his father's death, Tyrion Lannister felt the weight of his blood lift. The lion slept at last, and the man who remained was free. The sun rose over the eastern sea like a red coin, and the waves turned to glass beneath its light. Tyrion Lannister awoke on the sand to the sound of gulls and the steady rhythm of the tide. The cave behind him was cold now, its walls empty stone, the last trace of gold gone. Miria slept nearby, her cloak drawn over her shoulders, one hand resting on the hilt of her blade even in dreams. For a while, Tyrion lay still and watched the sea breathe. He felt lighter, hollowed out, as if something vast had finally exhaled through him and left him empty, but alive. His hand throbbed where the wound had closed, leaving a pale scar in the shape of a lion's claw. It no longer burned. The fire was gone, or sleeping somewhere beyond reach. He rose unsteadily and went down to the water's edge. The air was clear, the salt sharp on his tongue. He scooped a handful of seawater and poured it over his face. It stung, but it was clean, real. When Miria stirred, she found him staring east. "You should rest," she said softly. "I've done little else for a lifetime," he answered. "Rest is the one gift I've never been short of. Purpose now, that's a rarer coin." She joined him by the waves, her hair tangled by the wind. "The fire's gone," she said. "You broke the curse. You could go anywhere, do anything." He smiled without humor. "A dangerous notion. Men like me do best with chains, gold ones preferably, but any kind will do." "You don't believe that?" "No," he admitted. "But belief and truth are seldom on speaking terms." They followed the coastline north, where the cliffs gave way to grassy dunes and the remains of an old road. The path wound between scattered ruins, marble pillars half buried in sand, their carvings eroded to ghosts. The land felt ancient, older than kingdoms, older than names. At midday, they came upon a fisherman's hut leaning crookedly above the surf. An old man sat outside, mending nets with fingers like driftwood. When he saw them, he squinted, but did not rise. "You come from the south," he said. "Aye," Tyrion replied. "We come from fire and folly, both well spent." The man nodded as if this were answer enough. "You'll find boats in the next bay," he said. "One sails to Meereen before the week's end. If you've coin, they'll take you." Miria glanced at Tyrion. "Meereen again." He shrugged. "Where else should a half-burned fool go but to the city of dragons?" They thanked the man and pressed on. The road led them to a small harbor hidden between cliffs, where ships swayed at anchor and merchants shouted in the tongue of Essos. Smoke from cook fires curled into the bright sky, carrying the scent of fish and spice. Tyrion paused at the edge of the dock, watching the sails ripple. He had crossed half the world since fleeing King's Landing, and yet the sea still looked the same, wide, hungry, endless. Miria touched his arm. "You're thinking again." "Always a mistake," he said. "I was wondering whether dragons dream of lions." She laughed softly. "If they do, may the dream be a good one." They bought passage aboard a small cog bound for Meereen. The captain was a lean man with a scarred face and the cautious eyes of one who had seen too many strange things at sea. He asked no questions, and Tyrion offered no answers. The voyage was slow, the wind fickle. At night, Tyrion stood at the bow while Miria slept below, staring out at the dark water. Once, far to the south, lightning flared on the horizon, and for an instant he thought he saw a shape within it, a vast lion made of flame, walking among the clouds. But when he blinked, it was gone. "Dreams," he muttered. "Always dreams." When they reached Meereen, the city rose before them like a crown of pale stone, its pyramids gleaming beneath the sun. Smoke drifted above it from the forges and braziers of the Unsullied. Tyrion had imagined it often in his exile, a place of order, a throne to rival the Iron One he had fled. Yet seeing it now, he felt only weariness. The dock was a chaos of voices and smells, merchants, slaves, and soldiers shouting in tongues from every corner of the world. Tyrion and Miria moved through it like ghosts, unnoticed among the crowds. At the base of the Great Pyramid, they paused. Guards watched from the steps, spears glinting, while banners of black and red rippled overhead. The dragon sigil of House Targaryen blazed in the wind. Miria looked up. "And so we've come to the Queen." "Aye," Tyrion said, "the mother of dragons, breaker of chains, Perhaps she'll take pity on one more broken thing. He climbed the first steps and turned to look back at the sea. The sun was setting behind it, staining the waves gold. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a flicker of light beneath the water, a single golden spark sinking slowly into the depths. He smiled. "Sleep well, old friend," he murmured, "and stay there, if you've any kindness left." When he turned back, Miria was watching him. "What did you see?" "Nothing worth remembering," he said, and began the long climb upward. The halls of Meereen were cool and vast, lit by torches and the scent of incense. Tyrion's footsteps echoed against marble as they passed beneath arches carved with dragons and forgotten kings. Every sound, every shadow, carried the weight of history and judgment. At the doors of the throne room, Miria paused. "You could still turn back," she said. "Find another road, another life." He shook his head. "Every road ends somewhere. Might as well choose the one with good wine." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "You're a fool, Lannister." "Always," he said, "but a fool who's still breathing. That's a start." The great doors opened. Light poured through them, bright and white, glinting on marble and steel. And beyond it, high upon her throne, a woman with hair of silver and eyes like polished amethyst regarded them with calm curiosity. Tyrion took a breath and stepped forward. The sound of his boots on the floor echoed through the hall, steady and small, but sure. Miria followed at his side, her hand on her dagger, ready for whatever came next. When they reached the foot of the steps, Tyrion bowed low. "Your Grace," he said, his voice clear. "I am Tyrion of House Lannister, last of the Lions. I've come from the ashes of my past to offer what little wisdom I have left, and perhaps to find a home where fire does not devour all it touches." The Queen's gaze softened, and the faintest smile curved her lips. "Then rise, Lord Lannister," she said, "for dragons have no fear of lions, so long as they remember how to kneel." Tyrion rose, and for the first time in years, he felt neither the weight of gold nor the sting of pride upon his shoulders. The fire within him had burned itself to peace. The lion slept, and somewhere far beyond the city, where the sea met the sky, a faint shimmer of gold drifted beneath the waves, waiting, dreaming, as all old powers do, for the world to remember their name.